Well, we got a little rained out. We were going to go outside, but thanks to our friends at the Hornell Library, we've moved inside. A little different than the relaxing park atmosphere of Hornell.
Absolutely.
But Eddie. Thank you, Eddie, or
Eddie. Eddie's fine.
We don't want to do Edward.
Well, Edward's super formal. I'm not as formal, so I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely.
We're going to go over a little bit of yourself, build a profile for you, as well as talk a little bit about the issues, the policy-wise. We'll shoot through some of those topics and then get back to a little bit about you at the end.
Okay.
So
sounds great.
Give me a little bit of background about yourself, where you grew up and what brought you to the district.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm born and raised here in Jamestown, which is part of the district. Grew up here, ultimately went to school in Rochester at St. John Fisher, and then moved to Philadelphia where I was a teacher. I taught middle school science for about 2 years and did my master's at the University of Pennsylvania. Then got the opportunity to come back closer to family, went to the University of Buffalo for law school, and ultimately chose to come back to practice law here in the district.
Great. So do you have a family? What's your personal life? What do you do in your free time?
Yeah, so
the fun side.
The fun side. The fun side is I do have a mom and a sister. My mom has worked for FedEx for about 30 years, and she serves as a local constable for the city of Jamestown. And my sister's a volunteer firefighter, and she is also getting into the police academy, the sheriff's academy in Chautauqua County. The fun side for me, what I like to do on my off hours, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So I think a lot of it is I love to travel, and I love to go out and be new places and see new environments. It's been fantastic running for Congress only from the sheer fact that my job is to go out and meet people, and meet people in this district and to see all of the incredible places that are around this area.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So more of your professional career.
Sure.
What do you have a public service background, and if so, what aspect is public service to you?
Yeah, so public service and service itself is huge to me. Obviously I was a teacher, so it's a different kind of service that you have there. And I've always been working in the community, kind of as a community activist. I was a founding board member of a not-for-profit up in Buffalo that focused on restorative justice and changing the way we look at incarceration and suspensions in the justice system. And I here personally now, in my professional life, I'm an attorney. So my entire job is just to focus on helping people, especially in times that are probably the toughest for them.
So you went from teacher to attorney, now running for Congress. What brought you towards the run for Congress?
Yeah, I think part of it is coming back to this area to practice law, choosing to come back. I've realized that this is like the land that time forgot. Nothing has changed in this area. And in some aspects, it's fantastic. It's great that, we can count on that. But we haven't moved forward as a district. We continue to lose people. We continue to lose manufacturers. And that's not something that we can have. We need to start to look at the people that are here. We need to start to look at trying to change our district for the better. We need to start to retrain workers. We need to start to really bring people back to the area, both young professionals and everyone in between. And that's part of it. I think what got me to run is the realization that we need some type of change in this district.
Yeah.
The other part is that we've seen a lot of folks coming out that have never been in political atmosphere before, and I'm one of those folks. We're living a crazy time where we don't know what type of laws we're going to get. When laws are done in secret, it doesn't help us, right? So the other part of it is I'm running because we need people that are energetic and willing to fight and take these local issues here and bring them up to DC, because we haven't gotten that in a long time.
Okay. And so for you, one of the basic questions, kind of more of a philosophical approach that I'm asking all the candidates I run into, is what to you what to you are the requirements to run for Congress?
So are you asking me what type of person would be good for running for Congress?
Sure.
Okay. So I think the biggest thing is that you need someone that's willing to jump into the issues. We need to have a representative that if there's an issue going on in Hornell or in Ithaca, and it's a local issue and it needs some assistance, you should be there. You should be jumping into that problem and helping to problem solve. Because at the end of the day, helping the people that we represent is what matters. So I think a good congressman does that, jumps into the issues, understands what's happening locally, and is willing to take those up to DC, but also just to help what's going on locally as well.
Yeah. For you, what's that fine line between a congressman and a good congressman?
Yeah, so I think a congressman is one that just votes, right? He just votes, kind of votes down the party line, same thing every day. A good congressman is the one that jumps into the fight, right? It's the one that's here, even when there's possibly voting going on, comes back to the district, jumps into the issues.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so I wanted to get into some of the policy stuff, and we'll come back to more about you towards the end.
Great.
So to start off with the environment,
Sure.
First of all, does climate change exist? And if so, what are some ways we would combat that while also keeping in mind the industry and the jobs that people may be concerned about here in the 23rd District?
Absolutely. So my first response to you is that I like to breathe as a human being, right? And I do believe that climate change is real. It's crazy for me to think about the fact that we have kind of ignored science. As a middle school science teacher, I kind of take that to heart. I believe that we do have an issue, and we as a society need to start to look to ways to bring renewable energies on board in order for us to move forward. To your second part of the question, I think that we need to start to bring more renewable energies to this area. As we've seen manufacturers leave, we have a surplus of workers, and those workers can be retrained, and in my mind, retrained for things like building solar panels here, or building wind farms, welding different parts for the wind farms. We've got an incredible talent pool here, and we need to tap those folks to put them back to work, and then to also put them into jobs that are going to be sustainable, right? So things like building solar panels and whatnot. We've got the space, we've got the infrastructure, and we've got the ability to do so. We just don't have the resources currently. And I think that we need to really focus on that and tie those two together.
Yeah. All right. So moving on to a different issue.
Sure.
We're going to pop right through here.
All right, let's do it.
Rapid fire.
Okay.
The Second Amendment.
Sure.
So where do you fall on the line of everyone should be open carry to take everyone's guns? Not to try and sway those or push those things to the side. But where do you stand on the spectrum?
Absolutely. So at the end of the day, I believe that you have a constitutional right to hold a firearm. But I really do believe that your ownership should be safe and responsible. I am a supporter of universal background checks, and I really do believe that we should not be putting guns in the hands of folks connected to terrorist organizations or those that are severely mentally disabled. We need to make sure that ownership is safe and responsible.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you have a right to have a firearm for your protection, right? I was a hunter at one point in my life. I haven't been out in a very long time, but at the end of the day, that is something that resonates with the people here in this district. If you go to Allegheny or Cattaraugus, hunting is a way of life. You being able to have a firearm is, especially when there's not police that are able to respond fast enough, it is a way to protect yourself and to protect your family, and I support that 100%.
All right, the economy.
Yes.
Big talk, especially coming off the 2016 election.
Sure.
Of different ways that might have been a little bit outside of the normal routine over the last 10 or so years since the financial crisis. To you, looking at the district as it stands today, very economically diverse area between the rural parts of the district and some of the more urban parts. For you, what, from a broad economic approach, would be most beneficial to your citizens in the district?
So what is what should the economic plan be?
Exactly.
So I think
as exact as you can get with something
no,
like that.
No problem at all. No problem at all. I think that I alluded to it briefly in my last couple questions, but I really do believe that in order to support our economies, we need to support the local economies that are here, right? We need to take the folks that are out of work and we need to try to get them back into work. And we do that by providing funding for retraining programs. And I think that helps us to start to attract, companies to come back to the area. And I think that we also need to start to focus on Main Street for a lot of these places. If you look at, for example, Corning's done a great job in revitalizing its Main Street. And there are cities and towns across this district that are trying to do that. So we need to provide them the opportunity and the resources to allow that. Those two things in combination with each other brings jobs and manufacturers back and puts people to work. Mm-hmm. And that's what starts to spur our economy, especially in this district.
Mm-hmm. So moving on to education.
Sure.
Former middle school teacher.
Yes.
This probably strikes a lot home for you.
It does indeed.
A lot of talk right now about the education system from a larger macro standpoint, mm-hmm. of especially when it comes to the charter schools debate, mm-hmm. but not just that, where it's should we be trying new things and kind of abandoning public schools a little bit, or more should we be investing more in the already existing system? For you, from that macro sense, what do you see as the best foot forward?
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, we definitely should not be getting rid of our public schools. I think charter schools have a very specific purpose and are usually organized around a very specific type of student and type of study plan. And I'm for that. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we really support our public schools and our public school teachers. Too often we've seen them kind of put to the wayside, and that's not the way it should be. We need to provide the resources and the opportunities for these schools to thrive. And just the way that education funding happens in the U.S., it's very, very difficult. It's a function of a tax base in a local community. We need to make sure that we do everything we can so that every child has an excellent education regardless of their zip code.
Mm-hmm. Moving on to healthcare.
Sure.
Healthcare is the topic of the day.
Yeah.
We are here while we're filming this. The Senate is debating the American Health Care Act.
Yes.
Or preparing to. Looking at that, assuming you would take a seat in 2018, mm-hmm. or 2019 rather, the session would start. For you, if the AHCA passed as it is, or some form of a Republican healthcare measure to repeal and replace, what would be the top priorities to make sure are on people's health plans that are addressing health insurance, smaller parts of a health legislation that you would want to see passed from the House?
Okay. So it's no secret, I'm actually a big supporter of a single-payer healthcare system. I really do believe healthcare is a universal right, and we are one of the last countries to actually recognize that. So if the current bill as it's written in the Senate is passed by both the Senate and the House, I think that starting in 2019, we need to take steps immediately to ensure that the most Americans are covered, right? My concern is that this district alone is going to lose a tremendous amount of folks to this new healthcare plan. They're going to be off any type of plan that they've had, and current estimates show that around 68,000 people in this district are going to be without health care if the new plan passes. Now, more importantly, I'm very worried for Medicaid. If you start to cut Medicaid funding, the states are going to have to make up the funding some other way. And whether that's increased property taxes or some type of other levy, it's going to be very distressing to us here in New York. Mm-hmm. I think that come the first session, we need to start to work towards passing a bill that fixes that, right? That provides that the most Americans possible are covered. And then we need to start to engage people to really figure out how do we make a universal health care system for all here in this country.
Mm-hmm. For you, you mentioned you talked about universal health care.
Yes.
Is that for you the system to reduce premium prices? Because picking that apart as one small part of the larger healthcare issue, what for you, if universal healthcare wouldn't work, would be another possible compromise for reducing premiums?
Well, when I say that healthcare is a universal right, I don't think there's a compromise for that. Mm-hmm. In my mind, universal is universal, that we provide our citizens with healthcare at no cost to them.
Yeah.
Obviously there's the opportunity to get other premium plans, and you could go out and purchase your own healthcare. But having a healthy and safe person, a safe citizen, is what it's all about in this country. And that is part of it, right? So being able to provide that, I don't think that there is a compromise. I think that it is what we need. You know, if there's an initial compromise, I think what we have to do is we need to provide a way to immediately lower premium costs so that it's affordable for folks. And then we need to start to look at ways to roll out a Medicare for all solution.
Switching issues to immigration, and not just immigration as the macro sense, but looking at it here in the district.
Sure.
A lot of the agricultural parts of the district, dairy industry, wine and apples, fruits, employ a lot of migrant workers.
Yes.
Folks that come here on guest worker programs or might come here illegally. For you, looking at those farmers and the workers as they are, what are some ways or some immigration legislation that you would be able to pass in the House that could benefit some of those folks?
Yeah, so I really do believe that what we've got going on now is just simply unacceptable. You know, we need and rely on migrant workers and other folks in order to help pick our crops and help to supply our farms, our farmers and their work. You know, I think what we need to do is we need to have a very clear path to citizenship. And I think that we need to have legislation right away that provides that. You know, at the end of the day, they support our economy, and we should have the ability to make them citizens, you know, in a very safe and responsible way. Do I have specific legislation? Well, I think that, you know, what was a good start was the DREAM Act. You know, I think you've seen a lot of it being picked away at now by the current immigration policies. You know, I'll tell you, I was in Yates County the other day and talking to some folks there, and their biggest thing was their neighbor is an immigrant. And she doesn't know, and she's afraid to go to the park because she doesn't know if, you know, the government's going to come and try to take her away. You know, she's working hard just like everyone else on the farms and in different capacities. And in fact, she's actually paying into the system and paying taxes. But at the end of the day, she's still here, and she's seen as an immigrant, right? We need to find a way to make those folks part of our society because they already are, and we should recognize them.
Are there any specific ways, a lot of talk in that sector, and it does include a large part of the district.
Sure.
Would that come under H-2A reform or a whole separate guest worker program? Any ideas at that point, or is that something to address in Washington or more boots on the ground?
Well, I think you're asking for a very broad answer, right? I think that there is obviously a need for visa reform in this country. And I also think that we do need a program for migrant workers. You know, that's part of a larger visa reform program, I think.
Big issue across the district, both in rural areas and certainly the more urban areas. Ithaca, Hornell, Corning, is the opioid crisis.
Yes.
Heroin is something that's very well known to take the lives of many across the district. For you, what is some ways we could approach the opioid crisis from Washington?
So I think it's very important to recognize that these types of crises are really solved by working with people that are locally on the ground. And so it's very important to me that we utilize substance abuse councils, we utilize local organizations, not-for-profits, to help support each of these communities. And I think we can do that by providing specific either community block grants or additional funding to ensure that there are programs and supportive places that folks can go to help to kick the addiction. You know, I also noticed that it's not just heroin, but we also have a huge issue with prescription drugs, right? So we need a comprehensive plan in order to ensure that the prescription drugs are also done in a very safe and efficient manner, that we're not just prescribing this as kind of the end-all be-all. You know, as an attorney who originally started in workers' compensation, I had a lot of clients who became addicted to pain medication. You know, and it really was of no fault of their own. They were prescribed it, and they became hooked on it. You know, and that is just as bad as the heroin epidemic that we have. You know, so we need to find ways to support not only the illegal addiction and supporting our communities, but we also need to start to look at, you know, folks that are being prescribed this medication and why doctors are doing that.
A foreign issue.
Sure.
The instability, specifically surrounding the Middle East. There's a whole batch of different philosophy over there right now. Do we pursue a more active role in foreign conflicts, especially in that region?
Sure.
Or is there some reason to back out and kind of take a little bit more of an analytical approach? Is there something that you feel very strongly about either way or in that approach there?
Yeah, I really do believe that we need to be more supportive than necessarily active in it. You know, I think that there are very capable folks on the ground, and this was the initial route that we were taking, right? Which was we were in the Middle East and we were in those various parts for a very specific purpose, you know, to assist and then to be able to pull out and just support. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we need to do. I don't think we need to be sending more folks in there, more of our hardworking men and women that are in our military. We don't need to be sending more in there. We just need to be sending in the right folks to help train the people on the ground.
The not a counterpoint, but a different side of the argument is with specific crises like the refugee crisis. Do we take a more active part in efforts like that? And if so, how do we determine where's the line between we need to send more people over or we need to send more assets over and taking a step back?
Sure. So when you talk about the refugee crisis, are you talking about here home or abroad?
I meant abroad and more of the humanitarian crisis in Syria. My bad. Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, no problem. So I believe that what we need to do is we do need to have a humanitarian effort, right? There is a United Nations for a reason, and I think that it's important that we focus on not only diplomacy, but also helping out. You know, at the end of the day, our entire country was founded on helping one another. Whether that's helping our fellow American or whether that's helping abroad, I think that we need to start to focus on that. Having a humanitarian effort and being compassionate is going to be a much better solution than just sending in military. You know, and then I think that what we see now is we see a huge issue with our politicians where they've kind of forgotten about the fact that diplomacy is really what ends up winning at the end of the day. You know, we need to be cognizant of that, and we need to make sure that we focus on supporting everyone and not just kind of keeping everything for ourselves.
Another topic, community policing, kind of has been in the news recently. Just in the last few days, some police officers have been acquitted of trials they were in as far as shootings of black African American people. In the district, how do you feel, and outside the district as well, about community policing and different ways we can address what has really been more publicized as an issue across the nation?
So this is actually a very personal issue to me, not only as having a family member who's going to be going into policing, but also having been an advocate for restorative justice work across Western New York and in my time living in Philadelphia. You know, I really do believe at the end of the day, we need to be out there and really focus on our police being in the community, right? We need to focus on ways where when there is a harm that's occurred, that we repair that harm and get people back into the community that supports them. You know, when I don't believe that we should just have police kind of being an omnipresent all around. I think what they need to do is they need to be in our communities. They need to be an active part of it. You know, it's a very different mentality when you just have a police officer driving around in a car and no one knows who they are versus a police officer out there in the community knows the neighbor, you know, knows Sally down the road or knows Bobby Joe over here. You know, that creates and builds trust in our police force and supports them. And I think that we've gotten away from that. You know, we are so concerned about sending our officers just on the ground. But I think at the end of the day, when we realize that we are all part of a larger community, we can then make progress and move forward.
And last topic as far as policy goes, campaign finance has been brought up very recently. Specifically coming off the 2016 election, you've seen a lot of grassroots movements take place with Indivisible, Rise Up, and a lot of those kind of groups. Do you, as far as your campaign, a lot of talk of not accepting donations from large donors. Is that something you would pursue? And if so, how do you feel about the campaign finance issue in general? I should have asked that.
No problem. I think you want to be very careful with where your funds come from. You know, it is very difficult to track some of these PACs, but at the end of the day, if I don't feel comfortable with taking a donation, I'm not going to take it. You know, and I believe that we have a campaign finance system that doesn't really work well. You know, we do need to find alternatives to this system. You know, what that is right now, I think that's obviously been highly contested and highly debated. You know, but what we're working with now is not necessarily a system that's the most efficient. You know, and at the end of the day, like I said, if I don't feel comfortable taking a donation because it beholdens me to someone or requires me to vote a certain way, I won't. I just won't do it.
Now, moving more into the campaign and off the issues.
Sure.
But, and on the same topic, though, in the last race, the congressman did bring in almost $20 million plus. Looking at that number and realizing at the end of the day, should you be the candidate, you still have to run a race.
Yes.
How do you draw that line between we need the money and accepting that donation or not?
Yeah, it is a very difficult thing, but you know, at the end of the day, this is about voters, right? This is about constituents. So I won't take blood money, right? You know, I'd rather be out there. I understand I need to fundraise, but fundraising comes when you go out and you meet people, right? You get people that are tied to your campaign and tied to the outcome, and they're people that are here locally, and that's what I'm looking to do. Is I'm looking to get out there, meet people. And if they want to donate, that's fantastic. We need to support the campaign to get out there and do the work that we do. But I'm still here to meet people, and I'm still here to hear what they have to say. You know, and I realize there's a fine line, but we're going to move forward. You know, it doesn't scare me that Representative Reed has amassed a war chest. That just means he's nervous. Right? He's nervous for the different candidates that have come forward. And he needs to raise some money in order to make sure that he can do what he can. But I'm not too worried about that.
All right. So you, back to your background a little bit.
Absolutely.
Would you describe your background as a little more blue collar?
Yeah, like I said, my family all worked for different businesses. You know, like I said, my mom has been with FedEx for about 30 years, and she's been a customer service agent there. My father worked as a trucking company. So yeah, I would say blue collar. I've been so incredibly fortunate to be able to go off to college. I was the first in my family to graduate from college, to go off, get a higher level degree, and ultimately a law degree. I'm so fortunate that I've been able to do that. Not everyone can. But I would say that my family is middle class, blue collar, like most of the hardworking folks in this district.
Now, having the law degree,
Sure.
Wearing the suit, it's almost a point that it's kind of difficult sometimes to present your ideology and where you're coming from to some of the more rural voters in the district. How do you do that? How do you connect with everybody from Jamestown all the way through the middle part of the district and a very large part of the district all the way out to Ithaca?
Yeah. So I think part of it is just being real with folks and listening. We've had representatives that just don't listen. They do a lot of talking, but don't listen. So at the end of the day, I'm here whether I'm in a suit or not, or if I get the opportunity to take off the tie, that's fantastic. At the end of the day, I'm here to listen to people. And I want to make sure that that's the case. So whether that's going off to talking to some of the dairy farmers in Allegheny, or going to Cornell and speaking at the university to folks that are in academics, you've got to play both sides, and you've got to realize that the people that you're talking to all have needs, right? And you're just there to learn about them and find ways to help problem solve and move them forward. So honestly, whether I'm in a suit or not, doesn't really matter. I'm still the same type of person that's going around the district learning what people need.
Now, you're kind of a younger guy.
I am, indeed.
I'm one to talk. Yeah. Not to say the other candidates aren't younger guys,
Sure.
But do you think that'll affect you at all in the race, or will it benefit you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's only a benefit. I have the opportunity to really fight for what people need here, and I'm willing to do it as long as it takes. If I win, then it's going to be a fight for the 2 years. I'm going to do whatever I can and hopefully win again, right? But I understand that I'm young, and a lot of folks seem like it's inexperienced when you're young, but I don't think that is the case. In fact, I think that only helps because it provides me more opportunity to help this district for as long as I can.
All right. And my final question, one that I'm asking, again, all of the candidates I talk to. Should you either lose the primary race or lose the general election?
Yeah.
Is there something that during this time you want to leave behind? You want people to remember, oh yeah, that's the thing that Eddie started in his race. Is there something you want to leave behind in your race?
Yeah, I'd love to leave behind the fact that we as a district can finally come together. I think that what we've seen too much is we've seen Republicans versus Democrats versus everyone in between. My race has been about listening people to making sure that we understand what are their needs. So at the end of the day, I want to make sure that we understand that we can go meet our neighbor and we can go talk to our neighbor because that's what we need. In order to have this district move forward and progress, we need to be able to talk to one another. We've lost that a bit. And that's what I want to show in my campaign.
All right. Well, thanks so much for sitting down today.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right.
Okay.